Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode one of the Frogman Life. I first want to thank you for making it this far. You watched the Hello World episode, which was episode zero, and you probably liked the premise of what we are going to be embarking on in 2023 in Liberia. That must have kept you motivated to join us again on the first episode. And I think I should say thank you for that, for developing interest so far. And I hope that interest only continues to grow as we begin that work in 2023. So before we get started today, you probably noticed already I am standing. So I was already in a standing position. My desk is in a standing position and I was working standing up. And when it came time to make this video, and I said to myself, let's do this video standing today. But yeah, so before we get started today, before we reveal this big idea we are going to be working on in 2023, I just want to encourage all of you who are here for the first time to please hit the subscribe button and get the automatic updates in the future when we upload new videos. So today, before we get started into discussing the ideas, let's just do a brief preview of what we are going to talk about today. So one, we are going to talk about a very compressed version of the motivation for doing the work we are going to be doing in 2023. So I say very compressed because the motivation for it occurred over a long period of time through experiences that occurred over a long period of time. So delivering that in a couple of minutes is definitely going to be highly compressed. But again, in future videos, I will always make references to some of those landmark moments that really pushed me to doing what I am going to do in 2023. So first part of this video is going to be giving you that little synopsis of the motivation. The second part is going to be telling you exactly what that initiative in 2023 is going to be. And then in the end, we are going to tell you about the team behind this initiative. And don't worry, that part is going to be light because you already know half of the team. And we're also going to give you a sneak peek into what exactly that initiative is going to look like, as in giving you some visual of some very conceptual space of the work we are going to be doing. So let's get started. So you already know I'm from Liberia and I moved to the United States in 2004, okay? And I did my undergraduate studies and graduate studies here, right? So no need to go over a lot of the stories there because in the future we'll talk about those interesting stories that occur in those period of time that I'm just describing. But as I got to learn more and more, I was constantly thinking about Liberia because I had got some experience while living there. I grew up entirely during the Civil War there. So I did not grow up as a normal kid. At one point, I was a refugee in the Republic of Guinea. Then at some point, I was a lot of time in Liberia. I was a displaced person, internally displaced person. So those types of experiences are not things that you can shake off. And though I don't wish it on anyone, but I think it was also important for motivating some of the things that I'm trying to do in Liberia. So, but one of the things I started to realize is that the Liberian problem is really not a Liberian problem. Instead, it is an ensemble of Liberian problems. So what do I mean by that? So if you want to know actually what are the problems in Liberia, the best question to ask is what are not the problems? Because it's probably easier to list what the problems are not as opposed to what the problems are, because it's an endless list of problems, right? So we're talking about healthcare, education, food security, electrical power, water, and leadership problems. So, and all of those problems, I believe, they are underpinned by one serious shortcoming of our system, our psyche as a nation, and that is a thinking problem. And we will talk about this a little bit more in some episodes ahead. But we have an underlying thinking problem, and that has morphed into various symptoms, and we are struggling to solve those symptomatic ones right now. So I think, as someone who had experienced some of that and then came over to the United States and could sit and look back and compare and contrast both societies, it always was somehow puzzling to me why we haven't been able to solve our own problems. And as I learned more and more, although my education was in this abstract, highly mathematical science called string theory, I was interested and always constantly bothered by the human problems in Liberia. So I wanted to solve some of that problem, right? So this samurai, very famous samurai called Miyamoto Musashi, and he said something that stood out to me in a different context, but it stood out to me. He said, "It is not good for a warrior to die in a battle with his sword still undrawn." What for me, I know a warrior, much less a samurai, but what really that meant to me was that if I had managed to achieve a certain degree of education, a certain amount of technical skill set, and a certain degree of experience in the United States, failing to bring that to bear in a positive way on the Liberian society is equivalent to die in a battle with my sword undrawn. So I think for me, that idea of making a real societal impact, right? Other than just writing and contributing to fundamental science, which is important, is good for society in general, but making that type of societal impact, like a palpable impact, like immediate, like impact on my society, where I come from, is something that has been a priority for me. And of course, you can start probably deducing that I would always want to do that in physics. For example, perhaps raising the standard of physics education in Liberia, because why not? I had already gained a lot of the connections through my education journey, and in my professional physics journey, I have a lot of connections who besides physics, right, in most of the sciences and engineering, I have really great connections. I have been fortunate to make those connections with great and really good people at heart. And for some of these people, right, I can basically be very certain that if I were to tell them, give them a call and say, hey, I'm starting this college in Liberia, can you really help me? Let's design a curriculum, say in electrical engineering, right? Or say, let's design a curriculum in machine learning or artificial intelligence or physics, right? I have no doubt that they would jump on the opportunity to help me do that. And probably they will even go beyond to possibly like volunteer to instruct in these institutions. And we would be able to establish a world-class college or university in Liberia. So that possibility has been there, and I recognized that. So let's backtrack again. So because of my experiences and the education I had acquired and the connections I had made through my experiences, I always knew that I was morally obligated to bring that to bear on the Liberian society, right? To do something that would help. So I had that sense of moral obligation forever. at least since I got my higher education, right? And through the journey to get my higher education. But what then exactly am I trying to do, given my context and my skill set? And by the way, I just want to make this point that it's hard not to have this type of feeling when in the context of Liberia, without saying this to sound like I'm bragging, but my skill set, my education, my experience, it places me in a completely distinct class of individuals who are sophisticated and equipped to solve the technical problems that Liberia has. So if you take that statement, this is a fact, right? I mean, to be quite honest, my skill set and my education places me in a distinct class for any society in the world, period. But it's more amplified when we talk about the Liberian context, just because the human resource there is highly underdeveloped. So someone like me is much more rarer in Liberia than, say, for example, in the United States. So when I finished my PhD, or just before I finished my PhD, so here's a period in time when I just finished writing my thesis, and I was exhausted, right? And I had, I think, a few months, maybe 1 to 2 months in between the time I submitted my PhD thesis to when graduation was going to occur. So in that interval of time, I was very exhausted. I just needed to get away from Purdue University to go somewhere and just rest myself and get a little bit of a respite from the rigor of the physics journey. I had been away from Liberia for around 8.9 years at the time, and I chose to go back to Liberia to spend those couple of weeks in Liberia. And I went back for the first time, and fortunately for me, when I went back, I had already had these thoughts in my head. And however, I was broke. Not only broke, I was haggard and gaunt from the rigors of the string theory research work. But I was fortunate to meet a cousin of mine who at the time lived in a community where there were some lands available for sale. And I said to myself, hey, if I'm going to want to do something in Liberia, so at the time I'm thinking along the lines of education, right? I better start buying land around here, just so that I know I don't have any money now, right? But the little money I had at the time, like I really wanted to have a good time, just rest. I mean, I worked a lot. I think I probably have the stripes now, so I can brag about my hard work ethic in grad school. And I think hopefully a couple of my friends who were there, who witnessed that, can attest to the work ethic. And we all were working really hard. But I really wanted to have some fun, chill on the beach, spend a lot of time just relaxing, and I don't drink, but hey, I can party a little bit too. But yeah, so however, I chose to spend my money and buy 2 acres of land at the time. I actually didn't have all of the money for the 2 acres. My cousin really knew the family that owned the land very well, so he told me that, hey, my cousin is going to pay for the other acre when he returns in the US, and they agreed. And I gave him the money for the 1 acre, came back and bought the other acre. And at the time I was buying this land, it was a matter of how do I do something around education space in Liberia. And so that is why that land was purchased. And I came back to the US, right? And since then, I had not touched the land. Oh, by the way, I paid the remaining money for the other 1 acre of that land within a few months of my return to the US. But I think that lane was just somewhere at the back of my mind and say, hey, at least I have a place where I can initiate this idea in the future if I ever want to do this, or if I ever gather sufficient resources, right, to start to do this. So that was there, and I was thinking about it. And then I made some life choices, but even within that period of time, I also experienced a lot of difficulties. So we're talking about 2013 onward to present, right? So there were a lot of things that happened in my life. Some of them real tragedies within my family, and some of them real different life choices that I made, because at the back of my mind, I always wanted to do something significant in Liberia. And we will get into some of those choices I made in my life and in my personal career to be able to position myself to talk to you today about the project I'm trying to undertake. So these were things that I made decisions many years back to be able to be in this position today to talk to you about this. And we will talk about some of those things. But fast forward, now I'm here and I am now thinking about fulfilling some of those things that I worked for many years ago. And now that we've talked about the motivation aspect, let's talk about what exactly it is I'm trying to do in Liberia. So I decided, you're probably thinking, oh, Sana is now going to open this great world-class college or university where he can teach physics and science, because those are the fundamental things, right? And engineering, right? To building a society such as Liberia for it to really be competitive in this new age. But when I looked at the problem of Liberia, I asked myself, and let me ask you this: if I were to build such a university or a college in Liberia, it would be costly for me. It will also be costly for students who go there. And then the next thing you want to think about is, as a medium of transmitting knowledge or of educating our young people, it would definitely, no doubt, be a valuable thing. But I worry about what their credentials would enable them to do and what will be available for them to do. So the first part of that question will be answered by providing great quality education, but in the absence of proper jobs that are commensurate with their education that they would attain from that institution, I'm sorry, it would be a society with a lot of regrets, right? And I didn't want to. So I'm just trying to tell you, like, I think by now you're probably reading, I'm giving away too much of my psyche, and you can probably psychoanalyze me. But the point is, I am thinking about not only what I can do that at least make some substantial impact, but I want to go beyond what would just be considered superficially, right? And I know giving people good education is even beyond the superficial already, but I want to go further than that, and I want to solve a problem holistically. And the way for me to do that is not just to build a college or a university. So this is why in 2023, I've decided that we are going to begin a work to build a micro-sustainable tech city. And I will explain what these terminologies here mean. So micro means it's going to be small, of course, as you all know. So it's going to be a miniature city, right? It's not going to be very huge. It's going to be small, right? Maybe around 150 hectares of land we are talking about here. So it's not going to be super massive, right? But it's going to be large enough to host all of the significant and important ingredients that any major and advanced city, especially a technologically advanced city, can boast of. So that land area is sufficient for us to be able to develop these components of the city. And we'll talk about these components later. And what do we mean by self-sustaining? We are talking here about how do we generate and utilize the energy within the city. And I'm talking about power, electrical power, right? So it's going to be self-sustaining because we are going to employ the technologies today to use 100% renewable energy in this city. Even if we do not begin initially with being 100% renewable energy, for example, during the construction phase, we may rely on a combination of renewable energy and non-renewable energy to begin some of those construction work. But the idea is that we are always going to be approaching a future and a set date to ensure that all of the operations of the city are basically powered by 100% renewable energy, period. And a tech city here means we are going to be employing all of the advanced technologies in the very bedrock utilities we are going to have. So we're talking about the electrical grid, employing smart systems and sensors to make our grid smart and energy efficient. We are talking about how we process and collect water and waste, right? We are going to employ all of the latest technologies. That is what we mean. So, this is the idea that I'm trying to work on. But I think there is something here I need to explain. So I initially explained the motivation for why I'm trying to do something in Liberia. But I still feel there is a piece that is missing, right? Because I could have done different things. Okay, we already explained why I cannot just do a one component work, such as maybe building a university. Instead, I have to build a city that has multiple components. But I could still do something else, right? But the choice of building a city has another reason, actually, and that is what I want to explain. So the idea of building a city is nothing new, right? In fact, we are building a city in the context where there are also other cities like Monrovia, Kakata, and Vonjama, and Ganta. So these are cities in Liberia for those of you who are not accustomed to the Liberian geography. But even as from ancient times, right, since we as a species moved away from being hunters and gatherers to making farms, right, we started to settle down in communities, and those were the precursors to cities, right? And we know of many ancient cities. So this is not a new idea. And if you look back, what has made the establishments of cities so important in human history? It has shaped huge portion of human history. We cannot write a history of the human species without the histories of cities, in fact, if you look back, right? So some cities were powerful and they lasted centuries because of a couple of reasons. One of them was their ideal location and the technologies, right, that they employed. So the location perhaps gave them access to trade routes that allowed them to prosper, to increase wealth. And they invested this wealth that they generated from trade into science and technology that even reinforced their ability to optimize their trade, right? To use advanced ships, for example, right? To sail all over the world and trade with farther and farther away societies, right? So these cities were able to last this long and made significant impact on the history of human being as a whole, just because of the diversity of ideas, the possibilities, the number of possibilities that you can now generate within the city. This is what I think I want to do with Liberia. In Liberia, the city provides that opportunity for us to do that. But why can't we just take an existing city and do all of it, all of these things that I'm trying to do in those existing cities? Well, it turns out that Liberia has another problem. So there is a popular politician in Liberia who has a spin-off of Einstein's quote. He always says that we should not in Liberia continue to do the same things over and over and expect different results. Why I respect the idea of that, but what is more fundamental than that problem in Liberia is the problem is that in Liberia, the very platform on which we are doing these things over and over is actually corrupted. So let's bring this in the science domain. If you are doing a lab experiment, especially for my colleagues in the biosciences, life sciences, right? If you have a substrate that is contaminated, you always end up with the wrong results. And you can change the samples on that wafer substrate anyhow you want, put new samples on there, measure differently or measure the same way. You're always going to end up with the wrong results because your substrate is contaminated. That is the problem we have in Liberia. The substrate is contaminated. So, from the very founding of Liberia, there were a lot of mistakes and mishaps that happened. And those things basically brewed into different forms, right, in Liberia. And they still exist today. And as a nation, we are not even conciliated. But I hear people talking about reconciliation. Well, if we were never conciliated, we are never going to reconcile, right? So we are talking about issues of lack of inclusion from the very start of our founding, right, up to today's date, right? People from various sides of these tragic events, I do not seem to want to recognize that the mistakes that have been made can be like evenly spread around for everyone to accept the responsibility and come to the table to talk about these things. So we have a society that actually celebrates the iniquities that has been established and that thrives in Liberia. We have a society that does not want to think in the context that basically provides equal opportunity for people and allow people to utilize their potentials to succeed and motivate others to do the same. Instead, we have a society in which we will utilize every advantage we have, even ill-gotten advantages, right, to always stay ahead of the curve because we want to be the ones to be worshipped. So we want a future in which we have a lone tower in a community and everyone else are peasants and they are looking up to us. And we need to change that. And for us to do that in these old and troglodytic institutions that exist, it's extremely difficult. One key example is, for example, I was thinking about building a college. Why didn't I just, consider going and joining existing institutions? Well, the problems there would have been terrible, right? I would have gotten sucked into a system that, first of all, does not want to celebrate the diversity of thoughts and the additional way of the additional and more advantageous and more modern and better way of thinking about solving our problems, right? And so you cannot solve the Liberian problems by building on top of old things. So this is why we decided to say, look, let us do away with this old substrate. We work against ourselves to improve ourselves, right? By fighting against those tendencies that tend to basically give this type of motivation to just do the wrong thing. So by building a brand new city from the ground up, it gives us the opportunity to start to think at a very early stage of this building process. What do we think about inclusion? What do we think about equality issues among genders, people of different ethnicities, races, and religious background, right, or orientations in various forms, whether sexuality or political thinking, right, and even philosophies, right. So those are the things that we are trying to do, and the idea of the city just gives us that canvas and a blank canvas for us to be able to do that on. So that is the idea of building a city. So for now, for the next part of this video, I will like to talk about a little bit about what exactly this city is going to be. So first of all, the name of this city is going to be X City. So if you look at the word city, you remove the C and replace it with an X as an X-ray, you get X City. And we'll talk about why the X, right? But yeah, I know it's kind of a weird name, but that is the name of our city, X City. It's kind of cool, right? Think about it a little bit, you'll get used to it. So it's X City, right? And what is going to be the major things in X City, right? That is going to set it apart. So X City is going to be Liberia's foothold into the next industrial revolution. That means X City is going to be where young people will want to go when they want to acquire the knowledge and the work experience to participate in the next industrial revolution, right? In the age of artificial intelligence and machine learning. X City is going to be the place for people to go to, right? At least in the initial stages, because X City is not going to be in the end a unique place for that. Our idea, the vision here is that the bigger vision here is that we want to replicate this idea of X City in various places in the country of Liberia. So that is the one thing, right? And to be able to do that, we will need a lot of collaborations with all of our best skilled Liberians at home and abroad. And I emphasize, look, we cannot build a society like that without coming together as a people to work and build this thing. The story of this thing in the future will look much more grander, right? Much more, how should I say, aspirational. If the success of this basically relied and rested upon the collective and unified effort of Liberians from all walks of life. And that is why I decided to make this effort to make this thing public, so that I do not deprive you of the opportunity to participate in it, right? So that is the point. So in the next part of this video, let's walk through a little bit about some way you can get more information about X City, and to give you a sneak peek of what X City looks like today.